G'day, I'm Ali Amo, and this is the A Lease on Life podcast. This episode I have with me Emma DeSouza, and we have with us a pretty awesome all-rounder. She has a Bachelor of Science in Psychology and Biology. She's certified in yoga, meditation, and reflexology. She's a registered practical nurse who's passionate about mental health, motherhood, and celebrating the stories of our past while intentionally crafting our futures. So join me in saying hi to Emma. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here having these conversations with you.
So what got you into the wide variety of fields that you're into?
My passion has always been about helping people, and that looks so different in so many ways. And it sort of started the journey of how can I help people to the best of my capabilities. I also love learning. I am a lifelong learner. So it just kind of kept weaving and pivoting as things came up in my life and as new experiences inspired me. And so it started with the formal education, and then it became about a holistic approach. And I used to call it Eastern meets Western, because I think there's a place for both in the way that we help ourselves and help other people.
I couldn't agree more. I think there needs to be a balance of the East and the West side of things, especially when it comes to health. We have different perspectives and different approaches to things, and I think a combination is the most beneficial for people. When it comes to the story side of things, a lot of people tend to go towards the psychology route more to understand themselves than it is to understand other people, whether that's at first or just in general. Did you find your learning helped you think about the way you told your story very differently?
I think so. And I love that you said that, because I absolutely find that to be true about psychology. I started around 16 with a depression diagnosis, and that eventually grew into a bipolar diagnosis. And so this was all about my healing journey and learning to take care of myself and understand what's going on, as well as understanding other people, because whether you have a mental health diagnosis or not, our brains all work in unique ways. We all perceive the world through the experiences we've had. And so that always just fascinated me, understanding how the brain worked. And so all of this was to help other people, but it also was so healing for me at the same time, because I could approach my wellness, my mental health, my physical health from different approaches and different aspects. And so this celebrating your story, there were a lot of moments in my history that in the peak of my illness, I made decisions that I held shame around for a long time. And so this celebrating your story means our histories, our past are completely imperfect. And that doesn't take away from who we are today. It's actually helped craft who we are today. In that sense, it's worth celebrating, and then also intentionally getting behind where we want to go from here.
Okay. If you grew up with the experience of depression from quite a young age, and you're saying there's a bipolar diagnosis, is it bipolar low? Is that what they call of the two?
So there's typically bipolar 1, bipolar 2. There's one underneath it. I can't think of the name of it right now. And so bipolar 2 typically means you have lower lows and milder highs. And bipolar 1 is very high highs, manic versus hypomanic, and then some lows. Mine has gone back and forth between the diagnoses because I was consuming quite a bit of alcohol in university. That triggered a manic episode, which would have put me in bipolar 1. However, since I make very different life choices, like I don't really drink anymore, I take care of my bedtime, like I'm doing the things I'm supposed to do. I see a psychiatrist regularly. And so she believes it's more along bipolar 2, and that the drinking may have influenced how my mood was and the lack of sleep. Lifestyle is such a huge piece when it comes to mental health in general, but especially when dealing with a diagnosis like this.
What was your experience like with the process of working with psychiatrists and getting a diagnosis? Because from my experience, it can almost consume your identity or
Mhm.
shape your identity or shift your identity. And I saw it in school a lot as a teacher as well, where you're pushed to tick boxes, if that makes
Mhm.
sense, rather than
Mhm.
understand each individual as a complex and nuanced entity. It's, do they do this or do they not? We all have touches of bits and pieces in general anyway. Now they say everybody goes through mental health issues at some point in their life, but to be diagnosed and medicated and then prescribed as a patient for life essentially can very much take away from autonomy
Mhm.
and life experience for people. Did you find that as well for yourself?
I have two mindsets around this. I believe the diagnosis saved my life. I was very lucky to get diagnosed at a young age because that opened up resources for me. I had a really good psychiatrist and a really good psychologist. So I was going to therapy and I was seeing the psychiatrist, and I was under 18. So I was a youth. I felt very taken care of and very seen because for years I had been experiencing something that made me feel quote unquote crazy because I didn't know what was happening, why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And so for me, the diagnosis came as a label that made sense, but it also started a journey of not taking it on as an identity. And I think that was the big thing, is by having the diagnosis, it opened up resources so I could take care of myself and get healthy. But it also became a piece of me where I had to really work through this, again, shame piece of, does this make me different from my peers? What does this mean for me? What does this look like for the next 50, 60 years? I think that's the part that we don't have enough help on, because sure, we're taking care of the chemistry side of things, but what are we doing as the whole person side of things? That was really the journey for me to where I am now. That's 16, just turned 30. And it's been a lifelong process of deconditioning from being seen as my diagnosis versus owning that piece of me and being able to share the story of that piece, but also saying, I'm so much more than this diagnosis.
What do you think would be the key for you to be able to do that?
I think there needs to be a lot of self awareness and there's a lot of introspection, because you get so tangled up in the symptoms. Even if we don't have the label for it, the symptoms can be so life consuming. The negative self talk, the negative self perception, the ups, the downs, the exhaustion. When you're so heavily focused on the symptoms and what they take away from you, you start to lose what you have in life and what you can contribute to life. So for me, it's really that self awareness and that introspection to be like, okay, I may feel like this today. What I always say is like, a bad moment doesn't make a bad day. And that took me a long time to realize. It's little things like that. But just because I'm having a bad moment doesn't mean it's a bad day, doesn't mean it's a bad week, doesn't mean it's bad life. It just means, what am I going to do in this moment to take care of myself and shift how I'm feeling?
I think you're right also about the self-awareness. You can look at the symptoms as like an emotional state in general.
Hmm.
You can get
Yeah.
so lost in an emotion, you get swept away by the current of it. You're thinking about it more, you're feeding it more energy, and it grows bigger and bigger, and the symptoms can become exacerbated if you're unaware that that's what you're actually experiencing at the time. So being able to take a step back and recognize that about yourself. But that's, I think, like anybody, we need to have self-awareness in general. It's something that all the people of the planet need to be trying to increase and raise their self-awareness so that we can help understand ourselves and each other a lot better.
I think that's the other thing with mental health diagnosis is everyone needs self-awareness. Like you said, everyone needs to take care of themselves. Everyone feels a range of emotions. So there's actually not that much difference in what we need to do. There just may be an intensity level difference. But everyone has bad days. Everyone feels down. Everyone feels joy. It's really that spectrum of like intensity, but at the same time, what it boils down to is everyone should be taking care of themselves in the same ways. Really, it just looks a little bit different of the how they're doing it, but the concepts are all the same.
Absolutely. What I'm curious about, because I like the trifecta that you got going on with yoga, meditation, and reflexology. I would argue all three of them are more Eastern practices that have been brought over to the
Mhm.
West, right?
Absolutely.
What drew you down those avenues?
Yoga is something I started in high school. That I grew up as a competitive athlete in swimming and soccer, and I was looking for a way to continue challenging my body. I had a pretty significant concussion in 2008 that ended my sports career at the time. So this was a way for me to start moving my body again that also helped me calm the anxious feelings, really just like intensified that introspection in that time. And so yoga became meditative for me. I also love challenging myself to do a headstand. And so it was this fun mix with this actual self development that in high school was the perfect combination for me. And my love affair of yoga went on for many, many years before I became certified as a teacher. And it was a level where I just wanted to deepen my practice and my understanding and appreciation for the culture of yoga more than just the movement of yoga. And I think that's something in Western culture that gets destroyed a lot and overseen a lot. And so I really, really wanted to understand the roots of it because it's such a spiritual practice more than just this physical sweating to do a headstand. And so that was where that yoga came in. The meditation followed shortly after because I love meditating. I find it like a prayer, basically. And so I wanted to really deepen that understanding and be able to bring that to other people. And then the reflexology was something I am fascinated by, the mind body connection. And so that was all that was, is like to be able to tell so much from a single spot in your body about what's going on. And for me, when people rub my feet, I can always feel it in my chest and in my head. And it always is just like, oh, that's so cool. So learning about that was really, really fascinating. I love learning.
Yeah, you can get lost in that too. You get swept up with learning all
Yes.
the time. The application
Yes.
kind of falls to the wayside, but you keep learning. I really liked how the journey sort of flowed for you, and I like that you ended up in reflexology because it's not as common a practice to see, especially amongst the youth.
Hmm.
It's not just the feet though, is it?
No. So there's so many different parts, and I am not an expert on reflexology. That is the one area I got certified in the feet, but there's hands, there's ears, there's a bunch of meridian points that like really experienced practitioners move into, and it's all over the body.
So it's almost like the bottom of the foot has, actually it's both feet, and each
Hmm.
point triggers a certain point in the body. Is that right?
Yes, it stimulates it basically.
So what do they attribute that connection to? How is it connected with nerves, or is it energy points or something? I don't understand the connection behind it.
Yeah. So I'm in very like basic terms, meridian is like an energy line. And so all of them are connected through the feet. It's kind of like a energetic point that it's connected to. However, it's a very physical, real sensation. It is a combination of things, really.
How long have you been doing reflexology?
So I got certified in it a couple years ago now, and I did it for a little bit and then ended up ending my practice because with the pandemic, it was too much to take on at that time. So I
Yeah.
haven't done it in a couple of years, but the energy piece is a big piece. I did certify in Reiki. I
Okay.
also don't do Reiki anymore, but that energy piece is such a big piece. Our body tells us so much when it comes through in energy. And that's why I love meditation, because when we're quiet enough, we can start to connect with what's going on.
Did you have any similar experience when you're working with somebody, whether it was with reflexology or Reiki, and you felt that resistance?
Absolutely. I did Reiki for a lot longer than I did reflexology. And as you're working through the body, there's a lot of sensations. And for every practitioner, it shows up differently. Some people feel it physically, some people hear it. For me, I would get the words of like, no, don't go there, or yes, dig into this. And I would feel sadness, or I would feel tension. You also feel relief and joy in those things as well. But it's very fascinating how it comes across. And I would just know things about people, and I would be like, oh, did you and your mom have a fight recently, and blah blah blah, and people are like, what the fuck is going on with that? But it's almost like a permission when you ask the right questions for people to unload it. It becomes therapeutic because everyone just wants to talk. Everyone wants a connection at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And it seemed like we both had similar areas expand, heighten, magnify, whatever you want to call it. But that's what sort of the attunement side of Reiki does. It amplifies things that are already existent and opens doors that may have been shut before. Let's put it that way.
Very well said.
So your nursing side of things, do you work in mental health, or are you just an all-around nurse?
I did long-term care for a while in retirement. Geriatric is my favorite because I feel like it's such a appreciated population. But being in the geriatric side of things, there's so much life still to be lived with them. As a society, we forget that they're full humans who have lived an incredible life, and they're still very much energetic, and they're still very much wanting to do things. Sometimes, though, they just need a little bit of support or a little bit of guidance. So geriatrics is where my heart's at when it comes to nursing.
I saw that this service had been created that I thought was absolutely brilliant. I think it would fit perfectly into the geriatric side of things. Yes, it's for the family, but because so many people, as you said, they've got amazing lives, and especially the geriatric community now, what they've lived through, how they understand the experiences that they've had, but also how they
Mm-hmm.
see us, the world, like life in general. And what they would do is they'd sit down with them and record their life story.
That's amazing.
And so, yes, for when they pass, but you could also, people were talking about turning it into a television show where you're actually interviewing them and they're showing their pictures and things like that. But people don't realize what they actually live through and what they can add to our understanding of things, because a lot of people, I'm in Australia, so a lot of people came from other countries,
Yeah.
spoke different languages, grew up in different political systems, educational and economic systems, and you don't realize how far we've come. I think it's something to do with legacy, the name of it. But yeah, I thought it was such a beautiful idea. And you would get that naturally working with people. They tell you their stories, some on repeat, but yeah, you get a lot of that, right?
Yes. And I think that's why I love the intentionality of talking about our futures, because when we slow down, that's when everyone starts to share their stories. When we're too fast paced and rushing, it doesn't create opportunities. So I do find the geriatric community is slowed down naturally. So when we match that energy, those stories are just brilliant. And there's so much humor in them. I think a lot of that is because of the hardships our older generation has gone through, that they have found humor as a way to cope, but they are funny. I had a couple in the retirement home many, many years ago now, and they used to have to report falls. So if someone fell, you'd have to call the nurse, we'd have to come do an assessment. And this woman called for her husband because he fell, and he was fine. It was a small fall, but I did my assessment. And he looks at me and he goes, she falls all the time. I'm just not allowed to call you. And we had a good laugh. And she goes, you can't tell on me. And it's that sense of humor where they're well into their 80s, but it's just like a young couple again in high school, like teasing each other. And I think we forget that so easily in the fast pacedness of the societies we're in. So it's the slowing down where all those sweet moments come in. And that's why I'm so passionate about it.
And it's sort of that generation that's stuck by each other through thick and thin. With our divorce
Yeah.
rate now, it's going to be rare to find people that knew each other from such a long age, stayed together
Yeah.
through all the things life can throw at us. You just
Yeah.
reminded me, though, have you ever worked with patients with things like dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that as well?
I've had a few patients, yes.
It's heartbreaking, but you can find little bits of humor as well. I remember a friend of mine was telling me that because they forget what their, we'll say, relationship status
Mhm.
was. And there was this one woman she was telling me about, and she put the medication in her hand and she looked at it and she looked at her and she said, "Is this channel 7?" And she just started laughing. You get those little gold nuggets
You
of
do.
humorous moments by accident. Yeah, despite all the chaos and heartbreak that you see in that kind of environment as well. Do you side more with the science or the energy side of things?
It really depends case by case for me because I think there is a time and place for science, and I think there's a lot of time and place for energy. I think a lot of it comes down to energetic sides, but I definitely don't think it's a one size fits all for everything.
I understand. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I just like to see how different people
Yeah,
interact with things, you know what I mean? But
absolutely.
from you, with your background in psychology, what's something that you understand about childhood and how it has the ability to impact the experiences or your perception of them in the future?
This is one of those where I feel there's a science and energy piece of things. So, what we experience as children, our perspectives are only so formed. And so, what we learn as children are often considered as truth, as fact. So, that will change our perspective growing up. To relearn things is to challenge those beliefs or those what we considered facts as children. But I also think children are so intuitively connected to energy, and that's why they're drawn to certain people and not others. And so I think there's that energetic piece where if we can empower children to trust themselves and trust their understanding of energy, I think that's setting them up for success as adults to also trust themselves and trust their perception
Intuition.
of other people. Yes, their
Mm.
intuition, exactly.
And I think what clouds things sometimes are the parents' lack of perception because they become so disconnected from that part of themselves. That
Hmm.
and fear is a big motivator, and not so much in a good way. It creates a lot of
Hmm.
negative cycles with people, and you can perpetuate, or I call it inflict, those cycles on your children to the point where they then start self-inflicting and self-perpetuating, and they just don't trust themselves anymore or know how to tap into those sorts of things.
Since having both my kids, I am a big believer that parenthood brings up any trauma you thought you had resolved and then more that you hadn't realized was there. And I think it's our responsibility as parents to deal with our shit and not perpetrate that. But that's very hard. You have to intentionally be meeting yourself every day, and it's not going to be perfect. But that is the big piece where I think as adults, we have to be taking care of ourselves energetically, as well as understand the science behind what our actions do for our children and teach our children.
I couldn't agree more. I do understand there is a struggle though, because you might have good intentions in wanting to recognize the unhealed wounds within
Mhm.
yourself, but they become triggered to surface by some fairly random, seemingly
Mhm.
disconnected experiences. I remember my sister-in-law telling me on the weekend that my brother had a moment because he'd made eggs and toast for himself. It was late at night, and
Mhm.
my nephew said, "Oh, I'll share with Dad." And he sat there repeating to himself, "This shouldn't make me as angry as it is. It shouldn't make me as angry as it is." Because
Mhm.
he knew that that's such a minor thing, but it's showing him something about himself. And I thought to myself, just sitting at lunch with my sister-in-law, that's recognizing that you're feeling an emotion from that experience. That's a positive thing. But it's also trying to suppress a cycle that naturally wants to come out, and it's not doing anything to resolve what I call the bug that gets stuck in the web that you're spiraling around when you let the cycle run its course. But this is what I mean. These things will happen so frequently and over such a wide variety of things that doing the work, as they say, could potentially be a lifelong journey after that. So what are the sort of, what would be the little tips and tricks that from your experience could help those in your situation?
I think the number one piece is celebrate the self-awareness, because without it, we're not challenging any cycles, we're not making any changes. And then to also embrace that this is a lifelong journey. We're never going to come to the end of the journey, because in this lifetime, we are experiencing so many things and learning so many things and changing the generations past us. But there has to be that commitment to wanting to change. So the self-awareness is great. We're going to celebrate that. And then what are we going to do about it? I think some people should consider therapy. I am a big lover of cognitive behavioral therapy because it is challenging the thoughts that we believe are true, even if that is just our perception, but also finding ways to disconnect from the moment and being able to find the words that we want. So with my toddler, she's 2.5, she doesn't know how to discern. She doesn't know the differences and the nuances. So one of the things that we do to help her is, in the moment, if she is saying, "Mommy, can you help me change your shirt?" And I go to change her shirt because she's asked me to, and she goes, "Stop it." I have to then teach her, we are in control of our bodies. We do get to say, "I don't want help anymore," but there's a way we say it. We don't get to yell at people after asking for help. And so she doesn't know the words, though. She doesn't know or understand the tone that we use. In that moment, she is just learning, this is my body and I don't want your help anymore. Similar to us as adults, we have to give ourselves the words, and we have to find the resources to give ourselves the words to process and move through whatever the situation that's coming up. And I think that comes to a lot of self-initiative in finding what resources resonate with you as a parent and as a person, and really learning and teaching yourself and partnering with those you can partner with to keep you accountable to making those shifts and not perpetrating old cycles.
So, thanks for being here with us for this ep. New ones will come out to you every other Thursday. If you'd like to get in contact with Emma, you can find her at www.emmadesouza.ca. You can find her also with the same name on YouTube and on socials. All the links will be included in the show notes. Join me in wishing her all the best and thanking her for being with me. Have a good one, Emma. And you take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye, beautiful people.